Have you ever wondered what happened to all those legendary Japanese sports cars from the 90s? The Supra, the RX-7, the NSX, the 300ZX. It felt like one day they were everywhere, the heroes of our bedroom posters and video games, and the next, they were gone. Why did Japan's golden era of sports cars come to such an abrupt end? Well, the story is a lot more complex than you might think, and it's a fascinating mix of economics, culture, and changing priorities. Let's dive into the real reasons why these icons disappeared. To understand the death of these legends, we first have to understand their birth. The 1980s were a boom time for Japan. The economy was on fire, creating what's known as the bubble economy. Japanese companies were flush with cash, and they poured that money into research and development, creating some of the most advanced and exciting cars the world had ever seen. They weren't just building cars. They were making statements. Honda created the NSX to prove they could build a supercar to rival Ferrari, but one you could drive every day. Mazda perfected the rotary engine with the RX-7, a unique and high-revving masterpiece. Nissan's 300ZX was a tech-filled powerhouse, and Toyota's NK4 Supra became a legend for its bulletproof 2JZ engine. These weren't just fast cars. They were technological marvels. They had twin turbochargers, four-wheel steering, active aerodynamics, features that were cutting-edge at the time. The Japanese automakers were in a full-blown horsepower war, each trying to one-up the others. But there was also a gentleman's agreement among them to officially limit horsepower to 276. Of course, we all know that was just a number on paper. In reality, these cars were making well over 300 horsepower right from the factory. And tuners quickly figured out how to unlock even more. This era gave us cars that were not only fast but also incredibly well-built and reliable. It was a perfect storm, a golden age for enthusiasts. But storms don't last forever. The party came to a screeching halt in the early 1990s. The Japanese asset price bubble burst. The stock market crashed, real estate values plummeted, and the country fell into a long period of economic stagnation known as the lost decade. Suddenly, that mountain of cash that car companies were sitting on vanished. The priority shifted from building halo cars and technological showcases to something much more fundamental: survival. Developing a high-performance sports car is incredibly expensive. The research, the engineering, the specialized parts, it all costs a fortune. When your company is struggling to stay profitable, a low-volume, high-cost sports car is the first thing on the chopping block. Think about it from a business perspective. A Honda Civic or a Toyota Camry sells in the millions. They are the bread and butter that keeps the company running. An Acura NSX, as amazing as it was, sold only a few thousand units per year. When money gets tight, you have to focus on what pays the bills. So one by one, the legends started to fall. The Nissan 300ZX was discontinued in 2000. The Mazda RX-7 met its end in 2002. The Toyota Supra's production stopped that same year. The original NSX, the car that shocked the supercar world, held on the longest but finally bowed out in 2005. The dream was over. But economics was only part of the story. Society in Japan was changing too. The generation that grew up dreaming of sports cars was getting older. They were starting families and their priorities shifted. A two-seater coupe isn't exactly practical when you have kids to drive to school. A new type of vehicle started to gain massive popularity in Japan: the minivan. Yes, the minivan. They were practical, spacious, and comfortable. Automakers found they could sell far more minivans and sensible sedans than they ever could sports cars. The market demand simply wasn't there anymore. Young people in Japan were also becoming less interested in cars in general, a trend seen in many developed countries. With amazing public transportation and the rise of digital entertainment, the car was no longer the ultimate symbol of freedom it once was. On top of all that, global regulations were getting stricter. New emission standards and safety regulations were being introduced around the world. Making those powerful turbocharged engines from the 90s compliant with modern rules would have required a complete and very expensive re-engineering. For cars that were already selling in tiny numbers, it just didn't make financial sense. It was cheaper for the companies to simply discontinue the models rather than invest millions into updating them for a market that was already shrinking. It was a perfect storm of negative factors: a bad economy, changing customer tastes, and tightening regulations all hit at the same time. For about a decade, it seemed like the Japanese sports car was truly dead. The focus shifted entirely to hybrids, EVs, and practical family cars. The fun, it seemed, was over. But then something interesting started to happen. A new generation, who grew up playing Gran Turismo and watching The Fast and the Furious, started to rediscover these 90s legends. The internet fueled a massive wave of nostalgia. Prices for used Supras, RX-7 South, and Skylines started to skyrocket. People were importing them from Japan, and a huge global community of fans emerged. The automakers noticed. They saw that the passion for these cars hadn't died, it had just been dormant. This renewed interest led to a revival. We saw the return of the Nissan GT-R in 2007, a car that carried the torch for Japanese performance. Then came the Toyota 86 and Subaru BRZ, an affordable, fun-to-drive coupe that captured the spirit of the old school. And more recently, we got the new Toyota Supra and the new Nissan Z. Even Acura brought back the NSX as a high-tech hybrid supercar. It's not quite the same as the 90s. The cars are more complex, more expensive, and often developed in partnership with other automakers to save costs. The new Supra, for example, famously shares its platform with the BMW Z4. This is the new reality. Building a dedicated sports car platform from scratch is just too risky for most companies today. So what's the truth behind the disappearance of those iconic cars? It wasn't one single thing. It was a brutal combination of a collapsed economy that starved them of funding, a cultural shift away from performance cars towards practical vehicles, and increasingly strict regulations that made them obsolete. But the story doesn't end there. The legacy of these cars is so powerful that it fueled a comeback. The spirit of the Japanese sports car is alive and well, even if it looks a little different today. These new cars prove that the desire for speed, style, and driving pleasure never really went away. The golden age may be over, but the legends it created will live on forever, inspiring a new generation of cars and drivers. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite Japanese sports car from that era? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this look into automotive history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.